Hey, can you let me in this file cabinet or any closet, some yardsticks?
I got something to do tomorrow.
Okay.
Let's see, Gavin. Jude, that's not here. 1, 2, 3. Jamie. Mathis, Megan, Hadley.
Thanks.
Lucas, Brandon, Hadley. Brandon, bless you.
Good morning, FHS. Today is Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. Please join me in a minute of silence. Please stand as you are able and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and have a great day.
All right, good morning. This morning we're going to start off by picking up where we left off last class. So you will need a calculator, and then handout 24 was the one that had all of the sine and cosine graphs that you were trying to find the equation that matches the graph. So each of those had multiple correct answers. That's why you need the calculator to graph your answer and make sure that it's correct. I can't begin to share all the correct answers. There would be too many. So that's what I'd like you to check off the list first. And then second, one of the handouts you guys picked up this morning is number 25. Those are some ACT practice questions over this topic. So even though you've really only looked at it one day, today would be day 2, I still like you to kind of see what they expect out of you on the ACT when this stuff comes up. So as you guys finish up 24, some of you are closer than others. We had the bus evacuation drill last class, which put you a little bit behind the other classes, but that's okay. But as you finish up that 24, try those few questions on 25, and then once I see that everyone's finished with 24, and then everyone's finished with 25, I'll share the answers to 25, and we can talk about any of those that you'd like to as a group. And And then finally, for a little bit more practice, we kind of hit the reset button and start in the book assignments of this section. So I say hit the reset button because it's going to kind of start you off at square one, and a lot of the first questions should be pretty basic, even easier than some of the stuff in the notes. A few of those questions ask you to graph some stuff out of the book assignment.
Teachers, please pardon this interruption. I do need everyone's attention. This is Mr. Teague, the yearbook advisor. And as most of you should know, today is retake day for the underclassmen. So I will be coming on the intercom throughout the day, about every 30 minutes or so, calling students down. Sorry for the interruption, teachers. This is only for students who did not take a picture at Bulldog Blitz or who took one and didn't like it and want a retake. The pictures are taking place in the PAC, and we will be calling students out of class alphabetically with a couple of all calls throughout the day. Teachers, we really would like pictures of all of you as well, new pictures. You can come down anytime and we will put you at the front of the line. So at this point, we're going to start with 9th, 10th, and 11th graders whose last names begin with A and B. We're going to have you make your way to the PAC. So 9th, 10th, and 11th graders who need a retake or who did not take a picture at Bulldog Blitz, please make your way to the PAC if your last name begins with A or V. Thank you.
Okay, does that apply to anybody in here?
Does it concern exchange students?
Huh?
If it means also exchange students?
They probably would like one for you, would be my guess. Yeah. Okay, so again, before I got cut off there, I'd like you to finish 24, so I'll come around and help out with the ones that you are struggling with, give you some hints. I'd like you to try the 4 or 5 questions on number 25, the ACT style questions. Again, all those were from practice ACT books. And then finally move into the book assignment. The book assignment questions should start off fairly easy, but once I tell everyone's there, I will let you guys ask questions that I can look at with you on the board. A couple of the questions out of the book ask you to graph. I don't care if you graph on notebook paper, but if you prefer to graph on graph paper, that's why I put some graph paper out. You shouldn't need more than a piece, but I just given that to you if that makes it easier. So go ahead and start on 24 and call me over when there's something I can help with. About 24. That didn't help you. Start on 25, and you'll have to do that for homework now.
Mr. Townsend, I don't know why, but my calculator didn't it's not like showing like all and I was just trying to make sure that like I had that one finished. So I entered it and then I clicked graph and it just made it.
Well, one thing is you're in degree mode.
Oh, I am. Okay, yeah.
Calculator has to be in radians.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Okay, and then that might be enough, but it just depends on if someone changed those window settings before.
Yeah.
If it looks okay, then that's great, and if not, the window settings are up here.
Yeah. Okay.
Remember to check your answers on this number 24 with a calculator. Your calculator has to be set up correctly. And if you're borrowing my classroom calculator, someone may have changed some of that stuff since I've seen you last. So your calculator needs to be in radian mode. And if your window setting is something different, like negative 10 to 10, negative 10 to 10, it's not going to look right. So you need to go to window and change those settings. If you don't remember what those settings are, they are on the top of that worksheet, the top of the front of that worksheet. Ready to go with 24? if you get stuck, you could look at your notes from last class, but after a minute or two, just ask me, especially if no one else is asking me for help. There's no reason to wait. Also, just to be clear, I know sometimes we quiz pretty quickly, but as I told you all last class, we spend a few class periods on this one, so just so you guys are making sure you see that. The quiz is still not even next class. We're going to do more practice on Monday, because this is a B week, but that puts our quiz this time next week. So hopefully you're feeling pretty good about it by the end of class today, but you still have a full calendar week. Yes. Yeah, I know some of you guys are closer to being done with 24, just depending on how much class time or how quickly you got to it last class. Just move yourself along to 25. That's also pretty short. But when you're finished, you should go ahead and move on to the bookwork. Again, once I see that everyone looks like they have finished 25, I will share the answers with you, and we can go over all of them if you want to, or just the ones you need if you want to. And then once I see everyone's on the book assignment, I will give you several opportunities to ask questions, as always. But This is not something that you have to use, but on our class website, under assignment 24, I did link a Desmos activity that is the sine and cosine graphs and what happens when you change these values. So like, it does the sine graph, and then there's a little slider if you want to make A bigger or A smaller, you can see what it does to your graph. Or what happens when you change B, or C, or D. And then it reminds you what A, B, C, and D are. So if looking at that and playing with those sliders helps, then that is linked under number 24 on the class website. But you don't have to use it. But I would say if you're struggling remembering what A, B, C, and D are, and you're struggling remembering what A changes, B changes, C, and D change, then that's a quick way to just play with it for a second and then get some quick visuals. I don't think it works on phones, but it should work on your Chromebook. Absolute value vector. Period, you have to memorize the formula 2 pi divided by b, and you have to know that b is the number next to x. So that period would be 2 pi divided by 5, which would be obtaining the graph, but just stating what it is enough. Okay.
I don't know how I can get those words to
Okay, so how frequent it is what we call period. Period is 2 pi divided by b. That's the formula you have to use. So that's 2 pi over b. And in this question, you want it to be, okay, look at your graph. Starting here, you have to go all the way to here to see one full cycle. And that amount of space is 2 pi. So set this equal to 2 pi for this question. And then you can solve for b. So 2 pi divided by what it's going to give you. I'm sorry, this is just pi. No, never mind. I'm sorry. This is 2 pi. 0 to 2 pi is 2 pi. So what is b equal to this? Now 2 pi divided by pi would be 2. You want to know your 2 pi. 2 pi divided by what gives you 2 pi? Okay. So you want the number next to x to be 1. Okay, and that should be good just for b. But there's definitely some other stuff here. So you see how you have more of the graph below the x-axis than above? So the whole thing must be shifted down some. So I don't know, try to throw a -1 at the end of your equation. Okay. I still think that might have been helpful. But you need to think about your A value. A is the number you put in front of sine and cosine. So that's the amplitude. The max is 1. The min is -3. So the distance between min and max is 4. Amplitude is half that. So try putting a 2 in front of your cosine. once you pick cosine, you don't have to shift it left to right or reflected. It had that one intercept point, so when you do those other changes. So regardless if you had picked sine or cosine, you have to measure the amplitude to know what A is, and you have to measure the period to know what B is. And just because more of the graphs below, I knew it had to be subtracted at least one.
That's cool.
Pi over 3. So you're going to have to do pi divided by pi over 3, which is like multiplying by 3 over pi. What is this? Okay, so you can move on to the bookwork while you wait for everybody else to get there. Doing okay? Where's your back? You gotta be checking as you do it. That's the only way to know. Go to y equals. Type in what you think the graph looks like. And if it looks exactly like that, circle it as your answer. And if it doesn't, you gotta think about what should change. I just skipped the vocab. I just skipped the vocab.
I'll just see if I'm gonna come back.
Okay. Launch, remember, come back. cosine or sine, but that might change if you need to shift it left or right. I think the only thing you need to still fix is your amplitude. 3 goes up to 1 and down to -1. This is only going up to 1/2 and down to -1/2. So you need to do a different value for A.
I didn't know if it was like, if there was like a printing error or something, and that was wrong.
Oh, no. That would make the question too hard.
Teachers, please pardon this interruption. We are ready for our next group of students. At this time, we need 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, last name beginning with C and D, who need a retake, who did not take their pictures at Bulldog Blitz to make their way to the PAC. So 9th, 10th, 11th, last name C and D, please come to the PAC. Thank you.
just a couple more people still trying those ACT type questions, so I'm gonna give them a few more minutes. And then I will share all those answers with you guys and go over the ones you'd like to. As far as I can tell, it looks like everyone's had time to try those ACT type questions. So if you would put that back in front of you real quick so I can share the answers with you. They're also on the website, but this will be your chance to ask if you'd like to see any of them worked out. Let's see. Question 1, you should have had F. Question 2 was A. Number 1, F. Number 2, A. Number 3 was A. Number 4 was C. And number 5 was B. I think that was probably the hardest one. So 1F, 2A, 3A, 4C, and 5B. So usually you don't have to know too much about sine and cosine graphs to be able to do these questions on the ACT. So hopefully you feel like those are already fairly achievable, but I like to give you an idea of what it would look like when you see it there. So any of these 5 you want me to discuss the answer to? Okay. Then I believe you should all be moving on to the book assignment if you haven't yet. So I know some of you have already been looking at it for a few minutes, but I guess one thing I should preference here is when you get to the questions that ask you to graph, make sure you're not just putting that in the calculator and then copying the graph from the calculator down to your paper. That's not the practice that you need. You need to try to practice it by hand like we did on the last page of the notes. And so for those of you that have started the book assignment, is there any questions that you've already found that we might as well answer now? Okay, then I will bug you for some more questions in about 15 minutes. So. You need to keep it in your binder in case I ask for it. Anytime I have you turn stuff in, I always put it on the agenda page too, so that I say it and it's written. Hello? Okay, I'll let him know. Thanks. Will you actually leave that door cracked, please?
Teachers, please pardon this interruption. At this time, we are ready for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders with last names beginning E and F who need a retake to make their way to the PAC. So underclassmen, last names beginning with E or F, please make your way to the PAC if you need a picture retake. Thank you.
For finding the period, what should we round to?
You shouldn't round at all. Depends on the question. Did they give you a function or a graph?
Give me a function and then try to find a period.
Okay, so you have to know the 2 points. Period is 2 pi divided by b.
Yeah.
So you gotta work it out by hand, no decimals. So you're gonna have pi in your answer somewhere. Okay, it has been 15 minutes, so hopefully you guys have found a few things I can help out with on the book assignment. Number 5. I couldn't hear what you said.
Can we go over the vocab?
Oh, the vocab. Let's see. 1 period of a sine or cosine graph is 1. I'm going to guess that they're asking for cycle here. Again, the vocab is always exactly word for word, a page or two before. And yeah, that's on page 297. 1 cycle. Number 2, the blank of a sine or cosine curve represents half the distance between the max and min values. They are talking about amplitude. That's the definition of amplitude, so I don't need to find that one in the book. Number 3, for the function y equals a sine bx minus c, c over b represents the, that's what I would think, of 1 cycle of the graph. And then for the function y equals d plus a sine bx minus c, d represents a blank blank of the basic curve. D is vertical shift. Okay, any follow-up to the vocab check? Again, I know sometimes the vocab check, the wording's kind of weird and you're not exactly sure what they're asking for, but it's always exactly word for word in the previous pages. So if you're not sure, you can always find it there. Okay, what else have you tried in the book that you're unsure about? Even if you're getting the answer right, if you think that there might be a more efficient way or anything that I can help with. Yeah. 47. Okay, 47 is one of the graphing
Teachers,
questions.
please pardon this interruption again. We're going to do one more set of students this first hour. So at this point, we need 9th, 10th, and 11th graders with last names beginning with G and H to make their way to the PAC. So 9th, 10th, 11th, those of you who need a retake, please come to the PAC if your last name begins with G or H. Thank you.
Okay, so some of the stuff you're going to have to think about before you can even begin to graph this is you need to identify A, B, C, and D. Now remember, D could be at the end, the +2 could be outside of this, or it could be out here. So don't assume that D is at the end. It's not always at the end, it could be at the first. And then from this information, we should know things like amplitude, because absolute value of A gives you amplitude. We should be able to compute period. Now 47 is a little ways into the assignment, so if you haven't gotten to 47 yet, you really need to do the other questions first. But period is 2 pi divided by B. So B is 6 pi, that reduces to 1/3. Because D is 2, I know there's a vertical shift up 2. And because there's no C, there is no phase shift. So you don't necessarily have to write those things out, but those things need to cross your head so that you can try to graph this guy. So typically we try to make it go 2 pi to the right, negative 2 pi to the left, and it does help if you think ahead. Like usually cosine just goes up to 1. Since the amplitude's 5, it's going to make it go up much more. So I don't want to put 1 way up here because then my graph is going to be way off the charts here. But let's call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then what I would do, this is like the last page of your notes. This is one of the harder ones to do, but looking in all of this mess, the parent function is cosine. So if you take a second and you sketch cosine, it looks like that. Then you need to make one of these changes at a time, but you've got to make 3 changes. So I would say the amplitude part, the fact that A is not 1 is one of the easier changes. That multiplies it by 5. So 1 times 5 becomes 5. Negative 1 times 5 becomes negative 5. And then 0 times 5 stays 0. So if the amplitude's 1, it goes up to 1 and down to negative 1. If the amplitude's 5, it's going to go up to 5 and down to negative 5. So this represents 5 cosine x. Now, for you on your graph paper, you might want to start another graph so that you don't have like 5 different things going on here. Or if you make the first steps really light, where you can erase the previous steps if you don't need any more to get them out of the way, I think that's pretty helpful too. But then at some point I need to deal with this B value. So the fact that B is not 1 means that the period changed, and the period is 1/3. Now this is almost a little bit of a cheat, but mathematically it's still correct. My current graph has a period of 2 pi. I have to go 2 pi of distance to see 1 cycle. If I want to change that to be 1/3, not 1/3 pi, just 1/3, you can either think pi is about 3.14, so 1/3 of that is about 1, and about 1/3 of that is 1/3. So if you want to squeeze this pattern of down, down, up, back to where you started into about this amount of space, go for it, but it's going to be really crammed in there. So the trick to make this a lot easier is I'm just going to change my x-axis. I don't want this to be 0 to 2 pi. Now I want it to be 0 to 1/3. Do you see how now its period is 1/3? And over here, negative 1/3. When you're doing the graph, you can set the axis, the x-axis, you can set these lengths. So that's the quick way to fix period. Now one cycle takes 1/3 of radians. And I didn't have to redo my graph a lot. And the last thing was the +2. And +2 is just going to make all the values 2 bigger. It's going to shift the graph up 2. So you take all these points that you have on your graph, try to shift them up 2. This is where it helps if you do it on graph paper. It's a little less messy. And then that's your answer. So make sure that you show that's your answer by calling it Y or erasing all the other stuff. But don't leave multiple graphs on your page. So that's how I would graph that one. Now again, you need to practice that without a calculator, because we're not going to let you use a calculator on that on the quiz. That defeats the whole purpose of us seeing if you know what those things do and how they're going to change. This isn't the best example, but sometimes you can kind of check this. I can show you a way when we do a practice quiz in this section of how you can check for our actual quiz. This is just kind of a weird example. But for now, you could check your answers by graphing this in the calculator. You would need to change the windows from x max to -1/3, or x min to -1/3, x max to +1/3, and all that. And then you can see that your graph looks the same. All right. Caitlin, was that enough? Okay. Does anybody else all the way to 47 had the same question and need to ask something else about it? Okay. All right, somebody else got another question ready to go? Okay, let me give you about 10 more minutes, and that will leave us 8 minutes to take those questions. So we've got about 18 minutes left till y'all are dismissed. Everybody else finish this, and finish this, and okay, well, I asked you if you needed help earlier. You probably need to watch the class video from last time, before you fell asleep.
Is the absolute value of like a fraction just a fraction?
Mm-hmm. Absolute value, all it does is make it positive. So if it was positive, it stays positive. If it's negative, it becomes positive. But still stays a fraction if it was a fraction. Your phone? Your phone?
Oh no, I just took the case off. I can't find it.
It looks nice and clean. You
Yeah.
better get a case or as soon as you drop it, it's gonna crack.
Yeah. I mean, I've had it for a while, but
I don't like cases because they feel so bulky, but then I crack my phone, so. Good looking brush.
how would I do 2 pi divided by pi over 2?
2 pi divided by pi over 2. That? Okay, well, fraction bar just means divide. So instead of stacking them on top of each other, do this. 2 pi divided by pi over 2. Because that's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. The pi's are going to cancel out, reduce. I'm just looking for it. guys, we've got about 7 minutes here, so I need to take your questions to have time to answer them. Anything else that you found in the book assignment that you know you need to ask about? Yes, sir.
Why is the amplitude negative 467?
Well, it shouldn't be because amplitude's always positive. Now, A could be negative, but amplitude wouldn't be negative. It says amplitude or A, because that's not the same thing. Yeah. A can be -4. Amplitude is the absolute value of that. So the reason why that is 4 is by default the cosine graph looks like this. It's 1 to -1. But this graph goes as high as 8 and as low as 0. So half the distance between min and max. I guess I shouldn't say equals. Is 4. That's why the amplitude is 4. But the reason they're making A negative is just because you make this 4, now it's going to go up to 4 and down to -4. So that is roughly what 4 cosine x looks like. They made D be 4 to shift the whole graph up. So I'm just going to cheat and slide this down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now this is +4. So I've made the amplitude 4. I've shifted the whole graph up 4, and that's what this would look like. But if you look at their graph compared to my graph, do you see how it is completely upside down like that? So that's why A has to be negative, so that it had flipped over the x-axis at some point. But make sure you know, amplitude comes from A, but they're not the exact same thing. Amplitude is the absolute value of A. A certainly can be negative. Okay, somebody else have something else quickly?
On 13, what does it mean by describing a relationship?
So if you were to graph the cosine graph f of x, and you were to just graph the graph cosine 5x g of x, you don't actually have to graph them. But do you see how b is 1 for f of x, and b is 5 for g of x?
Yeah.
I would say the period of f of x would be 2 pi, whereas the period for g would be 2 pi over 5. That would be the difference between them. So, just trying to point out what looks different. Okay, well, you guys have about 4 minutes, so it's a good stopping point. Again, this is a B week, so I don't see you guys again until next Monday, so please try the rest of those questions. If you know that you don't have anything to do during advisory today, it might be worth taking a picture or two of the textbook pages that you need, maybe a picture or two of the answers in the back so that you have a quick check. Obviously optional, but that way you can work on it during advisory if you don't have something else to do. And again, our quiz is not next class. Next class we'll practice a little bit more outside of the book work. And I do have a practice quiz for you. We'll do that on Monday, quiz next Wednesday.